But ladies and gentlemen, this week again we saw the Jubilee divorce proceedings taking a new twist. This time I think we haven't seen what we saw, where the president up and about and saying quite some direct things that everyone believes were directed to his deputy. I think we can listen to the president basically saying that you shape up or ship out.
Justice James Kamau.
Unakuja unasema kwa mdomo moja serikali ni mbaya, alafu kwa mdomo mwingine ati tumefanya kama serikali. Kwani serikali ni ngapi? Mnajua serikali ngapi Kenya hii? Ni moja ama ni mbili? Si ni moja? Si ni moja? Kama unataka uzuri wake, kae naye. Kama unataja ubaya wake, toka uache wale wengine waendelee. Lakini huwezi kuja na mdomo moja unasema hii, mdomo mwingine unasema matusi ya wale ambao mko ndani yao na mmesema mnafanya na wao. Ama ni namna gani wenzangu? Kwerago heshima sio? Tuheshimiane jameni.
Wow. Tuheshimiane jameni. Linus.
Yes, what we are seeing is a bit of a history in the making as well, because since the 60s, when founding President Jomo Kenyatta differed with his deputy, well, we called them vice presidents those days, Vice President Jaramogi Oginga Odinga, we've never had such an exchange between the top two offices, the occupiers of the top two offices. So what you are seeing here is quite ugly, quite interesting, and in terms of how it paints the political space, not a very good place to be as a country, because we are sitting in exactly the same space today as South Sudan, where we have President Salva Kiir and Vice President Riek Machar in bad terms. And the only difference here is we don't have armed confrontation, but it is pretty ugly. I think going to the Constitution of Kenya 2010, this is not what the drafters of the Constitution anticipated, where we'll have the president and the deputy fighting an open war. And look at what the president had to say there. He spoke of there are no two governments. And again, where are the two gentlemen looking for solace in the Constitution? I think we can listen to Deputy President William Ruto on why he should not resign.
And going forward, there is absolutely no contest. And I respect the decision of the president, and the president calls the shots. He is in charge and he takes all decisions, and I have not countermanded any decision. And I will continue to work as Deputy President of the Republic of Kenya, because that is my place in the Constitution. And we want to tell our competitors, do not bring confusion into our government. We know where we are going, we know where we are, and we know how to get where we are going.
Well, the call to resign came from the president, not from
Political competitors.
Not political competitors. But you can see what the deputy president is saying, politely and partially aggressively, because when you see that stick, the movement of the stick itself wasn't gentle. And he's saying, basically, Mr. President, Siendi Mali, yeah. Constitution, I'm here because the Constitution says I'll stay here.
You know where I come from, Linus, what you just referred to, they say that when someone who is stronger or is in a stronger position steps on your mother's pipe, you know the pipe that they smoke, then you'd actually be telling your mother, sasa mama hata wewe unaweka hiyo, yes, uweke hiyo vizuri, so
And indeed, he's not going anywhere, he says. The Constitution says that is his place. Indeed, the Constitution of Kenya, Article 148, talks about, the role and the place of the Deputy President. Section 2 says there shall be no separate nomination process for the Deputy President, and that the IEBC shall declare the candidate nominated by the person who is elected as President to be elected as the Deputy, and he takes an oath of office as well as prescribed in the 3rd schedule. And it also goes on to say that his term of office or her term of office of the Deputy President runs from the date of swearing in and ends when the next President is elected. But there is an exit clause, which talks about the DP can choose to resign at any time by notice in writing, and he has to address that to the President, and it takes effect on the specified notice or at noon the next day. Of course, there's also impeachment as an option, but it really just does speak to how this Constitution envisaged the position of President and Deputy President, not a Vice President as we saw before, which is at the discretion of the President. So, in some ways they are joined at the hip, even though there are some exit clauses. But certainly this is now, they're now addressing each other, aren't they? It's where it goes from here that I guess is what we wait to see.
And the Constitution, I think, assumed or envisaged a situation where the two people are working in concert. That because they have been elected.
The president actually nominates the presidential candidate, picks his running mate.
Exactly.
He doesn't run solo and then comes to pick, a deputy or a vice thereafter. So it is assumed that when you pick somebody, that it's people, someone
So it doesn't help. It doesn't help that this is a constitutional office to the extent that it is provided for specifically in the Constitution, but it doesn't help that it's not given real things to do, which is why you hear him say, even his decision to give those roles that he's talking about, it's really not specified. Just saying that he's a principal assistant to the president. So there's a sense in which
is a very key function.
The framers of the Constitution did not anticipate a situation where they clearly did not, a situation where the president has a problem with his deputy, because there is actually no recourse for the president if he has a problem with his deputy, notwithstanding the fact that he's the one who picks. And that actually in our context where alliances are made to be broken, it actually can be a problem.
You see, what the deputy president exercises is delegated functions from the president. So if you're in good working terms with the president, then the deputy president is visible, is busy, is undertaking key government functions, like we saw between 2013 and 2017. But when there's a fallout between the president and the deputy president, then it means that the president can choose to hold back the functions that he was delegating to the deputy in the first term and assign them to somebody else as he wishes, because at the end of the day he has executive authority, so to say. But what we are seeing is a clear fallout between the two leaders, the president and the deputy president. However, if you contrast the 2010 constitution and the previous constitution, these obviously would not have happened during the, let's say, the Moi days or the Kibaki days or the Kenyatta days, because at that time the president had power to fire his vice president at that time. But here we have a scenario where the deputy and the president and the deputy are tied at the hip. The president cannot sack his deputy. There are specific ways of creating a vacancy in the office of the deputy president. One of them is not the president sacking his deputy. So unless you look for other ways of making sure that there's a vacancy, sacking is not one of them. And can you also trigger a resignation? Yes, you can. Frustrate the occupant of the office of the deputy president in such a way that
and hope
that he or she will resign.
Well, from the statement we've heard today,
or cause the exit via an impeachment. But here too you have to get the requisite numbers in the National Assembly and in the Senate. You're talking about 2/3 in the National Assembly and 2/3 in the Senate. For purposes of illustration, in this case you're talking about 233 in the National Assembly and 45 in the Senate.
Yes.
Those numbers are hefty.
Yeah.
For you to craft a proper impeachment motion, you must be sure of the numbers, number one, before you even
and you need
it.
103 to trigger it in the first place.
Absolutely.
Assembly.
And so all the deputy president of the day, if we were to retain the size of parliament as is now, has to do to avoid that impeachment, is to ensure that at any given time, you have about 120 members in your side, and you're safe all through. But it is also possible to have a big office, but without functions, so to say. And the frustration can be real. But also flip the coin. What if the deputy president was to resign? What does he lose? There's some certain powers and privileges that he enjoys today that he wouldn't enjoy if he exits office. And so it would also make him susceptible to quite a number of things, you know, prosecution here and there, if there is sufficient evidence to link him to one crime or the other. And so probably he would choose to stay put and fight from within. And the frustration can be real. There's a soundbite that the deputy president made in Isiolo that even though some of the functions that I used to undertake have been zimepewa mtu mwingine, and it is possible to see where zimepewa mtu mwingine. Executive Order number 1 of 2019 created the Cabinet Committee on Development Communication that is chaired by Dr. Fred Matiang'i. You can see a good chunk of the functions that the deputy president used to execute in the first term are now executed by that committee headed by Matiang'i. So it tells you there's a shift in terms of power, so to say, in terms of what you call the executive power. And politically, does it mean anything? I think it does.
Yeah, and Linus, we need to go for a break, but today, I mean, a meeting, a high-profile meeting, you know, presided over by the president, but his deputy conspicuously missing.
Yes, and it comes only a few days after the very public sort of exchange,
spat, yes.
the public spat. We expected that things can only get worse. But I also wanted to just say we need to look at the context around which these two leaders are finding themselves in. They're the first pair to occupy those offices under the current constitution. Now, a few things must be said. One, we borrowed heavily this arrangement from the American system. Now, this arrangement really requires a lot of civility, a lot of political maturity. It's an arrangement of first among equals. And if we look at the way the American presidents and vice president execute that office, they're never in competition. We just had a very, very interesting president the last 4 years that left in Donald Trump. Somebody who should be found disagreeable by a sober person like Michael Pence, but he never showed himself. He still knew this is the term of President Trump. You see, we started on a wrong note, and we all need to go to the files and see how President Uhuru Kenyatta and Deputy President William Ruto related. They related as equals. They related as co-presidents in a way, starting with the way they were presenting the cabinet. And when the cabinet was being presented, if you remember, Joe, the Deputy President said, there'll be only 2 politicians in the cabinet. That's myself and the president. So when you look at a statement like that, you're saying, whose cabinet is this? We have a strange situation where we actually have a cabinet that's not the president's. It's a cabinet of the president and the deputy president. This is a power-sharing arrangement. So they set themselves up for this day. It was bound to happen. Now, if you look at the statements by the deputy presidents in public functions in the first term, a lot of times he would say, Mimi na rais, or rais na mimi, you know, to suggest a duality. This went too far. It is supposed to be one president at a time. And he is the boss, the deputy president is a deputy, it's number 2, not an equal. So we have President Uhuru Kenyatta trying to correct the mistakes of the first term rather too late in the day. He never stood up to his deputy in the first term. The deputy was so powerful. Basically, you know, you remember talk of his running the show, appointments must be passed by him and all that. Now, you're coming a year 2 the end of the term to try and curtail that, it becomes a bit tricky. One last issue on the impeachment that you're talking about, and maybe we can talk about this after the break, Joe.
Yep.
Yeah.
All right, and we need to take that break now. We'll be right back with News Gang after a few moments.